For doing an estimate, you're going to go to the project on your schedule and then click on it, and then you're going to click complete assessment is what you're going to click next. And then you're going to click convert to a quote. And then from there, you'll title it whatever the project is. For the example one, we'll do retaining wall and concrete sidewalk. And then you're going to scroll down, select any of the stuff that's applicable. Say if it's a hard to access area, maybe there's a fence, or maybe we need a smaller piece of equipment, or if we need plywood to protect, say like some existing pavers that we got to drive over or something like that. Typically we'll notify the guys to talk to the client when arriving on site unless they'll not be there or if it's not applicable. And then usually as well, if it is applicable, which it is on most projects, to try to get a check at the end of the project. The final one is if there's not a lot of room for parking for trucks and materials and equipment and that sort of thing. Next, you're going to click the plus here by the line items for creating line items of what's going to be on the quote. Click the plus again. Typically, you're always going to do this for most stuff for creating unique line items individual to the project. So then what you're going to do is you're going to go to your notes for the project. So you'll pull that up, find the recent one here, example estimate. Typically it'll be saved by the address. And then what you're going to do is you'll create your first line item. So for example, this one would be a retaining wall. We're going to quote block and boulder both. So then what you're going to do is you'll do say like an option 1 and an option 2. So just for example's sake, option 1, block retaining wall, option. And then here you could put description if applicable. And then for this part here, what you're gonna do is you're gonna go to your pricing and you're gonna take the cost of materials, and then you're going to take the cost of labor and fuel and anything else that's involved, and you're going to multiply that by 2. After you've came up with your pricing, you're going to check it against our daily rates and our price catalog. So if we pull up, say, the price catalog, for example, and then if you go down to the retaining wall section, and if you look for, oh, this is the wrong catalog here with pricing. So in the retaining walls section here, if you look at, say, a block wall, for example, typically we need to be around this $65 a square foot. So that's the length of the wall multiplied by the height. So just for example's sake, looking at that particular retaining wall there, if you were to, if you were to say, look at this and you're taking 100 feet long by 2 feet tall, that would be 200 square feet. So at $65 a square foot, 200 square feet times 65 means it should be around 13,000. You're going to want to compare that to our daily rate for the guys. That's on the pricing guide as well. And so if you look at hardscape, for quarter day to a half a day, need to be around 3,000 for a full day, ideally around 6,500 or as close to that as we can get. A lot of times it is a little less. So on a job like that, we would need that project to take about 2 to 3 days to complete. So you'll want to make sure that based on what you're quoting out that seems accurate and attainable. I would say based off of that is correct. So what you're going to do then is you're going to put the 13,000 in here. Typically what I'll do is I will change it to say like 12,999, make it seem like a slightly smaller amount. And then again, this is optional, so it's going to be important that you select that so it doesn't add both options to the grand total. The client then can select the option that they want. And then for option 2, we'll do a boulder retaining wall option instead. And typically I put the word instead at the end of it just to make it clear that it's optional and that they're going to choose one and not both options. So then for this, we're going to go to our pricing guide, look at the boulder pricing, $50 a square foot. Again, we're going to take this and we're going to multiply it by 200 square feet. And we're going to check that against your pricing that you came up with when you took the materials, the labor, and fuel and multiplied it by 2. Again, your pricing should be relatively similar. Certain projects, the square footage pricing that's in the pricing guide here is not applicable or it doesn't work good. So that's why you need to take your labor and materials and multiply it by 2. So say, for example, if you had $5,000 in materials and you had 5,000 in labor, and then you multiply that by 2, it would be 20,000. On this particular job, you most likely came up with a smaller amount than that. So if you take 200 square feet to check your pricing, and you multiply that by, in this case, $50 a square foot, and this pricing may have changed since this video was made, so just double check that as well. But the way to check your pricing will still be the same. So for a boulder wall, it would be 10,000. Again, if our goal is to have the crew ideally around, let's say 6,500 for a full day or 3,000 for a quarter to a half a day, that would mean at that pricing, ideally you should be looking at that as like a 1.5 to 2 day job. I would say that's accurate for that. So then put in the $9,999 here for the boulder wall option. Again, we came up with 10,000, rounded it down to that to make it look like a slightly smaller amount. You can uncheck save to products and services. We don't need to save it every time, but you do want to check optional since it is an optional line item. And then you're going to click save. So then the client can select between those two options. Then if you go back to your notes here, you see the next thing was for a concrete sidewalk, 56 feet long by 5 feet wide. Same process for that. But this would not be an optional line item, so we're not going to save it, but we're also not going to click optional since it's not an optional line item. And then you'll put concrete sidewalk. Typically I would put broom finish if it's not stamped or colored or anything like that so that it's clear to them. And broom finish would just be like regular concrete. Again, not stamped or colored or anything like that. So then again, you're going to take your materials, you're going to take your labor, and you're going to multiply that by 2, or all costs, so include fuel and that sort of thing in that as well, and rebar and gravel and everything. And then once you've came up with your number after multiplying your labor and materials and all your costs by 2, then you're going to go back to the pricing guide again, and you're going to go to the concrete section. And then you're going to find the section where it has 4-inch broom finish concrete. 4 inch is what we would use for a walkway. And we would be prepping the base on this. So we'd be looking at around $16 a square foot. So again, you'd want to compare the pricing that you came up with after doubling the costs for the project, the materials, labor, everything like that, and confirm that that compares. So if we take 56 feet long by 5 feet wide, 280 square feet times 16, that's 4480. But then if we go up, we also want to compare to the daily rate for the concrete crew. For a full day, ideally need to be around 7,500, quarter to a half a day, 2,500, 3/4 of a day, 5,500. So in this case, this project would be about a 3/4 of a day project, which would put them around 5,500. As you can see, we're at 4,500 currently, so we would need to increase that to 5,500. So then what you're going to do is you're going to go back to the line item here, and we're going to round it up to 5,500, but again, we'll make it look like a little smaller amount by doing 5,499, and then we're going to save that line item. And then if you go back to your notes here, the final thing was for doing a rock bed between the retaining wall and the sidewalk. We typically just kind of use like an average price that would cover most rock options they would select. So you'd take your materials, your rock, weed barrier fabric, maybe there's some edging and labor, fuel, all your costs associated, and then multiply that by 2 to get a cost for that line item. And then you would go to the estimate here and you'd create that line item. Again, we're not going to click save, don't need to save any of them. And for this one, again, would not be optional since there's nothing to choose from. It's just the one line item. So we'll just title it rock bed between the new retaining wall and sidewalk. Could put in here average rock pricing used, covers most available rock options, unless you already talked with the client on the type of rock that they want. So again, you're going to take your materials, labor, all your costs associated with this line item, multiply it by 2 to get your price for the line item, and then double check that price against our square footage price and our crew pricing. So if you go back to the pricing guide here, and we'll find, let's see here, find the rock section here. So rock and weed barrier install, which is what we do for new installation, should be around $4.15 per square foot. So then if you go back to your notes and you take 3 by 56, it's 168 times 4.15. It's basically $700 is what the square footage price gives us. But then if we go to the minimums for the crews and you look at Softscape, for a quarter day to a half a day, we'd be at 2,000 on that. So then you're going to put in the notes here, 1,999. And then we're going to save that line item. And then if you look back at your notes here, you can see that there's lawn repair on there noted as something we want to note on the quote. Typically, we just price this off a square footage basis, depending upon what's needed. So then what you're going to do is we have a saved lawn repair line item. You can search for it, automatically add it to the quote. Don't need to click optional. Just notifies them that the lawn repair is not included, that it's priced on a square footage basis. We also want to make sure to add this 5% fee if they're using a credit card, or it'll do a 1.5% if using ACH, so that they're aware of that as well. Typically we'll try to sell them without a discount, but if you guys end up needing to give them a discount to get the project sold, you can make a note of that here, put the percentage on there, say if it's 25% or something like that. And then all of our projects, we do require a 50% deposit prior to starting unless otherwise agreed upon. But again, we try to sell it without a discount, but if they end up needing a discount in order to get the project sold, we would go ahead and put that on there in that section there. Then down in the notes here, this is just a message you can leave to the clients. So then in this section here, what you would do is you would put You could put information about the discount, maybe it's valid for a certain amount of time, or the pricing on the quote is valid for a certain amount of time. Typically also I'll have like a message that I'll copy and paste in here about how we offer financing or that sort of thing as well. So then what you can do is you could go to your notes, go to your message that you've typed up that you can copy and paste onto all your quotes, copy that, go back and then paste it on there. Again, I usually have something that I'll paste on to each quote, copy and paste. And then when you're done, you'll click Save Quote. And then typically what we'll do is we'll send it as a text and as an email both. So you're going to click Send. You'll click Send Text. Typically their phone number should already be in here, but if it's not, you put a phone number in, and then this would normally be their name there. So like this is how it would normally look. And then a lot of times I'll copy and paste that same message into here as well. And also I'd maybe put info if there was a discount about the discount also. Ideally, you'll want to be going over the quote with them in person, so then you could explain that stuff to them as well, so it wouldn't be as applicable. Click Send Text, and then we're going to click Resend, and we're also going to send it as an email so they have both copies or both versions. Again, normally this would be their name right here, so it would look something like this. And then you can see the total. It puts some info in about financing and that sort of thing. I usually delete this space here. It just looks kind of weird. And then one very important thing is you want to make sure to attach the quote to the email, otherwise they will not receive it. And then you're simply going to click Send Email. Again, sometimes you do want to add some info about the discount if you were giving them a discount or something like that, if you didn't get a chance to explain that to them in person, but obviously, ideally, it's better to explain it to them in person. So then you're going to click Send Email, and then it'll send them an email version of the quote as well.